What? Idiots. Oh. All right, see, it was worth the wait, right? It's not that kind of Friday the 13th party, but it is on Friday the 13th. We're having a family game night. All right, so come join us. It'll be great. And I just want to point out the incredible actor that Kevin is. Wasn't he amazing? Like, so over the top, it was funny. It was awesome. And Nate for filling in on Jason, that was great. Anyway, let's go back to this for a second. So we have plenty of places to volunteer. We need people in children's ministry, on worship team, taste and see nights. We need people to volunteer for that. And if you haven't been red carded, please fill out one of the red cards that's on your seat and tell us you can volunteer, because we really want your help. I don't think the church should be a place you just come to. I think church should be a place that you actually participate. All right? So we want everybody involved in church. We want everybody to be a volunteer. I hope we have 100% of the people that come here, and that's you guys that are at home online watching today because you're sick. When you get well, you need to volunteer. All right? So we're going to get everybody to volunteer. Okay, if we can, are we ready for the Kahoot? Did you guys all get signed in? Did anybody not get signed in on Kahoot? You wanted to get signed in? Are we ready to go? Are we having to pull that up? Almost. I know I'm really taxing this morning. We've got videos, we've got Kahoot. I want to mention to you also, too, when we get into this, I do have a study thing to go along this morning on your seat, a white page, and there's questions on there to fill out, and just go along with me. You know, we had Steve Darnell teach here a few weeks ago. Steve was a professor at HSU, and, like a professional guy. And so now it means I got to up my game anytime I get up here. So we've got stuff to fill out and stuff to do, and we want you to be a part of that. So just you can just go along and fill it out and be a part of it and do what we need to do. So did you have to close Kahoot out? April? You had to close it out? Okay. All right, well, we're going to go on. When you get that up and ready, let me know, okay? So I'm continuing a series that I started last week. It's a 3-week, I said it was a 3-week series. Honestly, after I got into it, we'll probably be in this for a long time. But it's on God encounters. How many of you know God encounters are important? Right? Having a God encounter is important. It's one thing to be a Christian. It's one thing to come to church. It's a completely other thing when you actually have a God encounter. And a God encounter can change your whole life in a moment. All right, is Kahoot ready? Okay, if Kahoot's ready, go ahead and, okay, is everybody signed in? We're going to hit start. All right, here's the first question. We're going to get to it. Remember, you have 20 seconds to answer, and the fastest answer gets more points. If you add the cost of the men's retreat with the cost of the table at the community yard sale, how much would that be? Were you paying attention during the announcements or not? How much would that be? So if you add the cost of the men's retreat and the cost of the table at the McKinleyville thing next week, how much would that be? There are your choices. On your phone, you just have to hit the corresponding color. So on your phone, hit the color. Look at that, 11 of you got it right, $80. All right, we had a whole bunch of people not paying attention during the announcements. That's all right, we'll forgive you. Why are women paying attention as much? Because you know your husband's getting ready to spend money. And there's not a woman that I know that isn't married that doesn't pay attention when her husband spends money. But that was a good question. See, I know how it is. You forget, I'm married. All right, so let's go on here. John Wimber says, we don't seek God's power, we seek his presence. His power and everything else we need is always found in his presence. Isn't that good? Listen, when we're talking about God encounters, really it's not the encounter necessarily. It's not the miracle that comes out of the encounter that's impressive. What's impressive is when you are in his presence. That's really the important part, being in his presence. So everything we're talking about, God encounters over the next weeks, it is really boils down to this. It's about his presence. But why are God encounters important? Because what is our purpose? The purpose of LifeHouse Humboldt is to reach Humboldt County for Jesus. That's our purpose. Now, I know that there are lots of churches that do lots of different things, and I'm not saying anything negative against other churches, but our church needs to have a focus of reaching other people for Jesus. Why do we want to do that? Because I happen to believe that a relationship with Jesus is the most important thing that anybody can have. And a relationship with Jesus will change not only your life, but your family's life. You know, my grandfather was a pastor, actually started this church, and my mom married my dad, and my dad's dad, the grandfather on that side, wasn't necessarily a great example. And so my dad, when my mom married my dad, he probably wasn't the greatest individual. You know, there's a reason that my family doesn't have family reunions. Because it's like, you know, mutants at table 8. It's like, we've had some really hard things. Anyone get the reference from Wedding Singer? That was awesome, huh? Anyway, anybody that has, you know, listen, all of our families have problems and issues, right? But sometimes it just takes one person to take a stand, one person to change a family directory. My dad was that person. When I was born, my dad was, he was a great guy who liked to party and liked to drink and liked to do stuff and liked to do whatever. And he just kept doing that. Married my mom. Unfortunately for him, he married my mom, who grew up in a Christian home and who was a praying person and who had crazy God encounters. And during the time when she had God encounters, you know, she had these God encounters, she relied upon Jesus, she knew Jesus, and so when my dad started straying off the path and started doing his own thing, my mom did what she did. She started praying. And one night, my father came home. Here's how the story goes. One night, my father came home. Actually, my father was driven home by some friends of his and dumped on our front lawn completely naked. He was drunk. He was out of his mind. They threw him on the front lawn, and that was it. Now, my mom comes out of the house, and they get in a big fight, as, you know, right? I think we could all see that one. And the way the story's told is that I heard the commotion going on, and I went outside. I was 2 years old. I crawled out of my crib. I went outside, and my dad's standing there, and as soon as he saw me, here's what he said. He said, "I looked at you, and I decided right then and there, my son is not going to grow up the way I grew up." And from that point on, my dad never touched another drop of alcohol. He stopped. He cleaned up. He made major radical changes to his life, and I am here today because of that decision. My sister is here today because of that decision. My kids are doing well today because of that decision. You see, those are how we can, when we talk about reaching people for Christ, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about changing trajectories, changing who they used to be, and introducing them to the creator of the universe who wants to do great things, who wants to do great things with them and through them and for them. You see, Jesus is for you. Jesus is so for you. He's such a fan of you. He's a fan of who you are. He's a fan of what you're doing. He wants to come alongside you and make your life better. So why are God encounters important? Because we're trying to reach the county for Christ. How do we do that? Through our mandates, right? You guys have heard me teach on our mandates. God encounters, authentic community, culture shift. We're talking about God encounters, but I spent several weeks on authentic community, and quite a few weeks on culture shift. Now we're on God encounters. But these are our mandates. Our vision is to reach people for Christ. How we do it is through these mandates. So we're going to talk about God encounters. But last week, I gave you homework to do. I told you to journal your experiences. And Cheryl went out and bought journals. Wasn't that awesome? She went out and bought a bunch of journals that are right out front here. If you need a journal, grab a journal on your way out and begin to journal your experiences. And what are those experiences about? Practice having a God encounter. How do you do that? Through His Word. That's one way. Read the Bible. Just read about Him. Get into it. See what He says. Through nature. You know, if you want a God encounter, we have an amazing grove down here that Nate just has been working out here, putting together. And if you go down there, it is beautiful. He's put it together. It's amazing. You can go out there, sit, and have an incredible God encounter right there. But people get God encounters through nature. His people, community, the things we do, the game night Friday the 13th, where we're going to have Jason show up and chase us all around. It's going to be amazing. But Friday the 13th, we're going to have a game night. That's part of experiencing encounters, because through community, through His people, talking to Him, just spend time talking to Him. Doesn't have to be a fancy prayer. You know, sometimes when I'm in the car, especially if I'm on a trip, I'm just like, I turn off the music, I just want quiet, and I'm there, and I'm just like, I'm just going to talk to the Lord. And I share stuff with Him, and you know what? He shares stuff with me too. Sometimes He speaks to me about things I'm thinking, well, I'm not sure I needed to know that, Lord. But you know what? Friends talk, right? Friends talk. They talk to each other. Other ways are soaking, listening, thankfulness, prayer, worship. All of these ways are ways to get into His presence. And when you get into His presence, that's when you'll have a God encounter. All right? All right, let's go to Kahoot question number 2. Kahoot question number 2. Go ahead and hit it. True or false? Omnipresence means His presence is all around us. True or false? Now, I haven't talked about this yet, so we're just going to see how smart you are. How about that? True or false? Omnipresence means His presence is all around us. Is that the meaning of omnipresence? And the answer is false. I know I got you. It was a trick question. Because the definition is God's presence is everywhere and at the same time. Not just around us, it's beyond that. The omnipresence of God means God is everywhere and everywhere all at the same time. I know it's a trick question. I got you. I got you. What the heck, though, right? One person got it right. I want to call you out and ask who it is, but I kind of don't. All right, there you go. Drixie, you got it right? Look at that. We know who's smart in here. All right, but yeah, omnipresence. Listen, in Psalms 139, 7 through 8, where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, hell, you are there. God is with you all the time, always and forever. There's never a place, there's never a time that you've been where God's presence wasn't with you. That's powerful when you think about that. So at your worst moment, you have to understand God's presence was there. It didn't leave you. At the worst thing that you've done in your life, God's presence was there. He didn't leave you. If you'll go to hell, He'll go with you. Wherever, whenever, He is always there. But we're not really talking, when we talk about God encounters, we're not talking just about His omnipresence. We're talking about a manifestation, right? A manifest presence. So it's one thing when you know that God is all around you all the time. Wherever I go, I know God's there. That's how big He is. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a manifest presence. And what's the difference? So a manifest presence definition is clear or obvious to the eye or mind. Now, if you are out and about or you're anywhere and you stop and you think for a moment, I'm sure you can come up with a conclusion that, yeah, God's presence is with me, right? But to make it clear or obvious to the mind, how many of you have had times where God has shown up when you didn't expect him to in a powerful way that was so clear and obvious that it had to be his manifest presence? How many? I have, without a doubt. Listen, I was at California Men's Colony prison down in San Luis Obispo. I'd gone down there with a friend of mine. He was famous, I wasn't, but I went down with a friend of mine to go to this prison and to speak to these men. And because of who he was, the prison, this church, this chapel that they have in the prison was packed. I mean, there were so many people, it was standing room only. You couldn't move. It was standing room only. And when they had a prison worship band, and when they started playing, I mean, you felt the presence of God in such a powerful way that it was almost shocking. In fact, when I got there, they introduced me to a man, and they said, he's the pastor. He's the pastor here in prison. Now, he's an inmate. He's one of the inmates. And as he was talking to me, I didn't know who the guy was, but he's talking to me. It's like his face was shining with the glory of God. It was the craziest. Like, I remember looking at him and thinking, this has got to be what Jesus looks like. I mean, like, it was crazy. And so they start going, this happens. Like, I end up in prison on the ground in between the seats because everybody in that room ended up on the ground because it was like he walked into the room and introduced himself. It was a physical, tangible presence that was so real. I remember thinking to myself, man, I'm not sure I'm going to get out of this prison. It was that intense. And then I had another stranger thought, was like, I'm not sure I want to get out of this prison. Now, later on, as we left on the drive out of there, one of the guys that had set this up, he was a prison chaplain, one of the guys that set this up asked me if I knew who I was talking to. You know, this was the guy that was assigned to us, the prison pastor, assigned to us an inmate to make sure that we had everything we needed and we were safe and everything. I said, I have no idea who that is. It was Tex Watson, who was part of the Manson murders. He had had such an encounter inside the prison walls that God had changed him so much and changed him so much that he actually shone like Jesus. You see, that's what Jesus can do in our lives. That's what Jesus can do in any of our lives. And that's why having a manifest presence is so important. When you have had an encounter with his manifest presence, when have you had an encounter? When? I want you to think about it just for a second. When have you had an encounter? I want you to close your eyes and just think about it just for a second. When have you had an encounter with his manifest presence? And as you're doing that, they're going to bring up Kahoot question number 3. Hopefully you guys will get this one right, because I'm a little disappointed on that last one. I'm just saying, y'all disappointed, except for Drixa. She came through. Look at that with a commanding lead. Wow. All right, what is the purpose of LifeHouse Humboldt? What is the purpose of LifeHouse Humboldt? Culture shift, God encounters to reach Humboldt County for Jesus, authentic community. If you get this one wrong, I'm just going to ask you to leave. I'm just saying, you better get this one right. All right, let's see. Hopefully, did everybody get it? What? All right, I don't want to know who the 2 are. All right, we're going to keep going here before I say something rude and get in trouble. All right, so in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, if you have a Bible, you can turn there, but I'll have the verses up here. And this is where your study guide, your thing you could fill out and take home with you or whatever. You could start working on that. So faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. But I want to focus on this word substance this morning. Faith is the substance. Well, what does this mean? How many of you have read this verse and thought, I'm not really sure what that means? All right? Okay, Only me, I guess. That's fine. But I want to define substance. So if I define substance, the first one doesn't really fit, a particular kind of matter with uniform properties. But the second one is spot on for us, all right? The real physical matter of which a person or thing consists and which has a tangible, solid presence, right? Because we're talking about his manifest presence. So faith is the substance, the real physical matter, the tangible, solid presence of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Did you get that? Doesn't it make that difference now, right? Faith is the substance, real physical matter. Faith is real. Faith is something that you can hold on to, that you can grab a hold of. The tangible, solid presence. So when you're in faith, you can feel it. How many of you know, listen, sometimes, you pray and you pray and you pray, and then other times you pray and all of a sudden you just feel like, all right, like it's good. Like sometimes, you're going after something, but then all of a sudden sometimes you know it. We're going to see a testimony about that in a minute. But right now, let's go to Kahoot question 4. All right, Kahoot question 4. Let's see what this one's got. Rick's is staying in the lead. Who is generally credited with writing Hebrews? Who is generally credited with writing Hebrews? I know some of you are saying, man, you made these really hard this week. And I did. Luke, John, Paul, or Matthew? Luke, John, Paul, or Matthew? Who wrote Hebrews? The verse that we've been reading. There you go. Look at that. Paul, 16 of you got it right. Fantastic. Good job. So let's go back to this. Suppose faith is real physical matter, a tangible, solid present, then we need to make room in our lives for that presence. I want you to think about it just for a second. I almost had an illustration where I was like, we have way too many things going on up here this morning. But if I had a big bowl full of water, and I took rocks and put rocks in that bowl, what would happen with the water? It would overflow, right? I think that's what happens to us sometimes when we talk about faith. We have stuff that's in our bowl that we have to get out so that we can have more of the presence of his tangible matter, right? So that we can connect with him. And so what do we have? Well, 5 things that do not work with faith, all right? And all of us are guilty of all these. So I'm talking to me, if anything, this morning. So our faith, if faith is real physical matter, a tangible, solid presence, then you cannot have room for doubt. How many of us have doubt? Listen, I have doubt all the time, right? I think doubt is part of a human nature. I think lots of times, you're doing something, all of a sudden you have this, I'm not sure it's going to work out. Listen, you can't allow doubt to come in and to take up room inside you. You can't allow that. The Bible tells us take every what? Thought captive. So when you have doubt, you have to stop right there. And it's not, how many of you would agree with this? It is not God's will for you to doubt. Right? We agree with that? All right, if it's not God's will for you to doubt, why do you do it? Well, because it just happens. I get that. But when it happens, you have a responsibility to take it on. You have a responsibility to stop, like my father stopped when I was 2, and he had the thought, this will never happen again. Stop in the middle of your doubt and say, all right, in the name of Jesus, I take that thought captive. I know what I'm supposed to do. I know where I'm going. I'm not going to let doubt fall in place for this. I'm not going to give doubt any place inside of my container so that I can't have more of his presence. Does that make sense? Now, hopefully, as we're going through this, some of you are thinking about things that you've doubted, and I would encourage you this. Get a journal. Go back. Write it out. This is what the Lord said. I've doubted. I'm going to take that doubt captive in the name of Jesus, and I'm going to go forward. All of us doubt, you guys. All of us doubt. But it's what you do when you doubt that matters. It's how you react to that doubt. You know, for a long time, after my first wife, Martha, died of multiple sclerosis, for a long time, I didn't feel like I had it in me to pray for somebody. I thought, well, I prayed for Martha and this and that, and you know, I had this doubt. I just had doubt on me. But that's not the Lord's will. The Lord's will is for me to go forward and for me to be who I'm supposed to be, and that's somebody who prays for people to get healed. So I had to set that aside. Why? Because I'm trusting in Him, I'm believing in Him and not my circumstances. If we get caught up in our circumstances, life isn't going to be what we're supposed to be. What else? So the first one on your sheet that you can write down there is doubt. All right? What else? What about worry? How many of us worry? Listen, I grew up with a mom. She was a professional worrier. She could worry better than anybody I've ever met in my life. In fact, if I was 2 minutes late, by the time I got home, she'd already called the police station, the hospital, all the ambulance companies to make sure that I hadn't gotten a wreck. It's like, Mom, I was only 2 minutes late. Well, I was just sure something happened. You cannot have room for worry. You cannot have room for worry. Worry is faith in the wrong guy. Can something bad happen? Of course something bad. Something bad happens sometimes. But you know what? It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Jesus will walk with you through the worst times of your life, times you can't even imagine. I have seen firsthand, through my first wife, what the enemy can do. And I have come out with a conclusion that I'm not impressed. I am not impressed with the enemy. Why? He killed my first wife. She's in heaven. That's pretty awesome for her. Well, what about you? Sure, I missed her. Sure, it was hard, it was horrible, but I also saw God's faithfulness in a way that I didn't even know existed. I saw God's faithfulness in a way that allowed me to come back, to build up, to get back to a place where I know that I'm doing what He's called me to do. I've seen God's faithfulness in my children in such an incredible way. So I've seen the enemy take a shot, but I'm just not impressed. And if I'm not impressed, I'm not going to worry about it. Because when things happen, He will pull it together. He makes everything okay. Now, I know I'm probably talking to some people right now, and you don't believe that, and that's fine. I understand. I've been in those situations. But I promise you, if you will release this, if you will allow Him to come into the situation, whatever the situation is, if you will allow Him to come into the situation, it will be okay. And listen, you're not responsible for the outcome. You're only responsible for your actions going through it. All right, let's go on. What's number 2? How about fear? Oh, fear's a big one, huh? Fear's a big one. But fear is also one of those things that you can't listen to. Fear's a liar. Fear will, how many of you sit around listen, I'll be transparent with you and I'll let you into my life, all right? If I have a really tough circumstance or I'm going to have I've been into an issue or a fight with somebody, not a physical fight, I quit doing that a long time ago, I'm too old for that. But you know what I mean. If there was an argument or something, and you sit around and you talk about it in your mind, like I sit around, if they say this, then I'm going to say that, and if they say that, I'm going to say this, because I'm afraid of what's going to happen if I go into the situation. And you know what always throws me is every single time I've ever done that, the stuff that I thought about never happened. Never happened. 99.9% of the time, all the stuff that we think about, the negative stuff, doesn't happen. And so I hate when you get in a situation like that and it's like, I'm ready. Like whatever he says, I've got this. And then he looks at you and goes, I'm sorry. And you're like, dang it, I wasn't planning on that one. Right? We think about stuff. We fear stuff. Fear is made up. You do realize that, right? Fear is something that we make up. Fear. Now, I'm not talking about, listen, you're in an abusive situation or so. I'm not talking about, stuff like this. Stuff like that is real, and you should be afraid, and you should get help, and I'm talking about stuff in your mind. The stuff you think up. That's not real. And so take fear captive. When you start to fear, again, take every thought captive. Take fear captive. What's next? How about pride? Oh, that's a good one, huh? Pride. Well, I don't really need the Lord for this. I got it. I remember when I used to play football in college, and I would call home and it wasn't at a Christian university. I wasn't necessarily living a Christian life, and I was just, playing football, and I was very prideful. It was all about me. It was all about what I did. And I would call home, and my mom, the praying woman that we talked about earlier, would say to me, son, I'm praying for you. Or before a game, this is the one that just got me. Before a game, the night before, she goes, well, I'll be praying for you during your game tomorrow. I was always like, don't pray for me. Like, I just want to do this on my own. That's prideful. Right? But there's other ways. All of us manifest pride somehow. But when you're dealing with the Lord, when you're dealing with what he wants to do, when you're dealing with his manifest presence, when you're dealing with a bowl that can only hold so much, you want to make sure that you empty yourself of any and everything that you can to get more of him. So release yourself of pride. Think about these things in your life. What is it in your life that you're dealing with that's prideful, that's something that's going on? And it can be a little thing. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It's just a little thing. Just let it go. Just release it. Why? Because you want to have the experience that he wants to give you without anything being in the way. So pride. All right, we're going to go to the last Kahoot question. We're going to get a winner right after this. Let's see, Drixa staying in the lead. Oh, but somebody's catching. We'll see. If you get this wrong, Drixa, you're out. All right, fifth thing that Willie is going to mention that does not work with faith is, what am I going to mention next? Religion, arrogance, greed, selfishness. I know, I haven't said it yet. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Which one is it? A $10 coffee card on the line. Religion. All right, we're going to mention that in just a second. Go ahead and bring up the winner. Get the winner. Trixie, did you get it right? No. Oh. And the winner is Drixa. You got it wrong, but so did everybody else. All right. So Drixa, see me afterwards. I'll get you a coffee card. All right. Faith is real physical matter, a tangible, solid presence. Then you cannot have room for religion. All right, we're going to go. I want to go to a video testimony, and then we'll talk about this one in just a second. Let's go ahead and bring up the video testimony if we can. We're working on it. All right, well, you guys keep working on the video, and I'll just keep talking. How about that? All right, so faith is real physical matter, a tangible presence. Then you cannot have room for religion. Listen, Christianity is not about a religion. It is about an encounter with Jesus. And I believe with all my heart that God's presence is moving mightily on the planet. I think things are moving in the right direction. I know that we have horrible stuff happening. I know that there is a war going on in Ukraine. I am not unaware of that stuff. But I also believe that we have an incredible move of God happening. And how that move is going to look may be different than anything any of us are ready to handle. You know, how many of you have heard of the Jesus movement in the 70s, right? Listen, the Jesus movement swept the planet, swept the United States. And there were lots of things that happened in the Jesus movement the church was not ready for. And there were a lot of churches that closed their door to people who were being saved in the Jesus movement. Why? Because they were hippies. They were getting saved left and right, but they were having this incredible move of God, and churches didn't know how to handle that. And instead of embracing it, they shut it out. And what should have really changed the church forever didn't change the church the way it should have. Because the people inside the church didn't want anything to do with the people being saved outside the church. And that's a shame when that happens. But that happened because of religion. Religion is on all of us. Listen, I'm telling you, I will bet you that 90% of the people in this room, and I think that's a low estimate, but 90% of the people in this room are all carrying around